Okay, should be live right now. Hello, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. It's been a while since I streamed. It's pretty much, I think, the first time on in my YouTube career. I don't like to call it career, but ever since I've had a YouTube, I think this is the first time I've ever had longer than a hiatus that lasted for a week, right? Like more than a week of no uploads. Uh, you will not guess the insanities that I had to go through. Plots, devious plots against my life. Flying alligators. Yes, that's true. Laser pointed lions trying to snipe me from distance. And a trip to England. I said three things. Only one of them is true. You can guess which one it is. So I was basically on vacation for a week. And I'm back today. I just now got out of the airplane and got back home. Right? So I decided to do, hey, I might as well do a stream. I'll try to keep the stream short. I want to kind of also make some comments and state some things, and then tomorrow when I'm re-energized, I might make more videos and streams on focused topics. But I just kind of wanted to get back and hey doggy, thank you for barking. I just wanted to get back to YouTube, make a video, tell people that I'm fine, and kind of answer questions, whatever questions that people have in the live chat. Uh, Typically, I'm going to say that make sure to like this stream, or if you're watching the recording, make sure to like. Nevertheless, whether you're watching this live, whether you're watching the recorded version, um, questions will be answered in the live chat. Super chat is more than welcome, and those questions are going to be answered in greater detail. So, okay. So I want to kind of, before I get to answering the questions, we can have a little bit of a backlog here. But before we get to answering the questions, I want to kind of talk about some of the things. I'll probably, if you missed it, I recently being 1 week ago, I debated on the Crucible on theism. This was the first time I've ever debated on this subject live. So first time in a long while I've ever debated. If we exclude the debate, if I exclude the debates between the monophysites, it's been like 4 years since I've actually debated. So I'm not too much for debate type in today's age. I actually like debating in like 2016, 2017, and having some discussions with 2018. But somewhere along the line, I kind of decided that it's really when I became Orthodox. Somewhere in 2019, I kind of decided that um, debating and discussing things with people is kind of a waste of time. And the reason why I think that way, the reason why I think it's a waste of time, isn't because, oh, I can't convince the other side. It's because you end up focusing too much on the details of the debate or discussion that, you know, you spend much less time actually trying to find the answers and more time trying to find the answer in the moment. If you kind of get what I'm saying. So I want to give an example to make my point here. In 2018, like for example, I will regularly get into debates that was way over my level. 2018, I think, right? It's 2017, 2018. And regularly, and I think most people do this. They don't say this, but most people do this. Because I actually caught someone doing this against me like live, and like they didn't have any shame, right? Which was insane to me. But during the debates, if someone made a point that I didn't have any answers to, I will try to just, you know, stall for time, and I will just go on searching on Google. So I will Google my arguments basically, and I know most people online do this. Most people online do this. If they do it in live and in the manner of voice communication, the problem I've seen happen is usually at some point people will be very sharp, but then they will play dumb when they can't answer a question. So I think the Dr. Bo Branson and a mental idiot debate was a very good example of this, because the Muslim guy's argument was basically that if you posit divinity as being caused, whether it's a person or whether it's something else, right? But in his case, he was talking about a caused person, right? A caused person cannot be divine in any world. That was basically his argument. And Dr. Bo Branson simply just asked him, okay, do you believe the attributes of God are distinct from God himself? And this guy believed that to be the case. And then he asked, okay, are the attributes ase, or are they caused, or are they at the very least, do they have God as a source, right? Now, if they say that they stand by themselves, then you're basically a polytheist. So you have to admit that they have their source in God. But that is, then you realize that fundamentally their whole criticism just is invalid at that point. They can't critique the Christian for saying that a caused person is divine, that a caused person is God, because his whole argument is predicated on something being caused. Something that is caused cannot be divine. That was his whole argument. And I completely and utterly destroyed his argument. And when he was responding with that, he just said, I don't see how that has to do anything with the debate. Like, he knows that it has something to do with the debate, but he's acting dumb. So I saw this attitude regularly. And ever since then, and I've done this myself, not too much, not what he did exactly, but like the Googling arguments thing. And so I basically vowed at some point, I'm just going to read, become an expert on whatever people are disputing, and then I'm going to make presentations refuting every single person making these arguments, and that's going to be it. But then I realize that the world doesn't work that way. So unfortunately, you do have to get down and just get down to their level, because that's what people want. That's what gets popularity. That's what gets the views. That's what gets the attention. That's what gets the engagement. So you have to be dirty. You have to be very low in terms of character, while also acting as if you have a very good character. And I find that despicable. I think that's despicable behavior, but a lot of people do it. So it's not really much you can do. I see this very regularly. Like atheists, really popular atheists do this, right? They're the first ones to get really nasty. They're the first ones to go low, but they will always act as if they have the high ground. But that's just how it works. I taught in these levels, in this regard, down here with us, I'm talking about people who spend a lot of time online, who are in the know about these things online. I thought it will be different, but it's not really. I'm not trying to blackpill. This is not why I didn't stream, by the way. This is something I came to realize a long time ago, 1 or 2 years ago. But anyways, I want to get back to the topic. The debate between P.F. Young and I on the Crucible on agnosticism and theism. So before I get to answering the questions, I want to kind of rehash the arguments I made in a language that might be more understandable to a lot of people, as a kind of review. The main, now I don't remember a lot of the things that were really important as a post review thing for the debate, because it's been a week. My memory is bad, but I think the main part that I made my point in the debate was, I basically pointed out, you are basically making a lot of assumptions that aren't even necessarily justified, and you think it's fine, right? You think it's the same as me saying I believe in God and he is the basis of my worldview. But the difference is, I have one so-called leap of faith. I make one faith claim and center this faith claim around the worldview, whereas you don't have a central faith claim. You don't believe in a divine being that sustains the world. You foundationally believe in your own experiences. And the problem with that, and this is one of the 3 arguments I pointed out, the problem with that approach is that if your starting point is your own personal experiences, then what do you do when that can be called into question? Because that's something that can completely and validly be called into question. You can't just say, well, according to these other aspects of my experience, I can verify that my experience is valid and usable and justifiable. That is just using the very thing that is in question. This is why it is necessary to base as your foundation your argument not on an autonomous epistemology, which is what I described, but a theonomous epistemology, which is basing your worldview on a divine mind that is omniscient and omnibenevolent, so that he doesn't trick you, and that he knowing all things can be the basis and the source and the foundation of all things and of all knowledge, right? So God is the very precondition of knowledge himself. To be able to justify and account for being able to debate in the first place necessitates the existence of God, because there is no other explanation. There is no justifiable explanation, because the alternative is human autonomous epistemology. But as I've shown, that's a problem that you cannot go by. Another argument I used is the one and many argument. This is an argument that I personally quite like, because it isn't necessarily a straight up theistic argument. It is more so a theistic argument that points out the Trinity. Because all theistic worldviews, I will rather say, all major theistic worldviews, so Islam, Judaism, other Christian sects, right? Well, Christian sects rather, because Orthodoxy is not a sect, but you get the point. Will admit that there is some kind of a balance between unity and plurality in reality. Okay? That there is no ultimacy of one over the other. The moment you say that there's ultimacy over one or the other is essentially when you say that all reality is one. But coming to true knowledge of things as opposed to false knowledge is something that requires distinctions. But distinction is illusory. So the mode in which you come to know the truth becomes an illusion, which means truth itself becomes part of the illusion. That cannot be the case. That is completely against the very definition of truth itself. Truth is necessary, right? Because, again, the very precondition of arguing necessitates the idea of truth. To give an example, I think most people are already very aware of this whole example already, is to state that ultimate truth is not true is to make a truth claim. So if it's false, if truth is false, if it isn't real, if it's an illusion, then you're making a truth claim. You're using the very thing that you're denying. That's the point that we're trying to make when we argue for God. But the alternative is also not possible, because then you merely have differentiation with no basis for unity, right? So the example I like to give is humanity, right? When you look at two different human persons, when you look at Peter and Paul, you can see the differentiation between them, but you also simultaneously understand what unites them. Well, Peter and Paul are human beings. Humanity unites them. So in reality, one and many are co-ultimate. So what's the point with one and many? The point is, if in reality one and many are co-ultimate, then the ultimate source and foundation of reality himself is also one and many. Is kind of the explanation. And what other God than the Trinity is able to account for that? You will notice, in fact, in the various arguments for theism, especially those who adhere to identity thesis, or what people call absolute divine simplicity, it is very difficult to account for this, if not impossible. Anything that is spoken of as plurality ends up being just something created, which is not a necessary aspect of reality itself. That felt good. I didn't drink nor eat for a long time, like between yesterday and today, so I'm feeling a bit not gluttonous, but I need to recharge my fuel a little bit. Anyways, so I think the third argument that I had, oh, give me a second. Gotta fix this as usual. I need to get a rich person camera because I have a brokey camera. It's low quality, and using my phone as a light source is not fun. My phone used to not crash down all the time. Now it does it again. I'm not gonna spend time doing this. Anyways, I hope, yeah, this should be fine. And the third argument was, for man to argue, he must assume knowledge of things. For to deny knowledge is claiming knowledge of the non-existence of knowledge. So the same argument with truth, right? If you say knowledge is an illusion and it's not real, do you know this? Or you have knowledge of it. If you don't have knowledge of it, you can't make that argument. I remember a philosophy professor, when I made this argument against him, pointed out, well, actually, you can circumvent that argument, he argued. You can just say, well, I have faith that this is the case, which is, it falls into the same objection that P.F. Young falls into. Let me just do this for a second. I don't know why it doesn't work this time. Whatever. All right. Falls into the same objection, basically. You're just making multiple faith claims that are unjustified. You do not have a justification. So with this problem, all you can prove, unless you provide a justification with knowledge, is that you're just proving that human psychology cannot think beyond this, right? It cannot think beyond the ideas of logic, mathematics, knowledge, right? All of these things that must be true, all you're proving is that it's according to the human mind. So it falls into the same autonomous epistemology problem. And so knowledge must be justified. And the justification of knowledge is not a human mind, right? But the justification for knowledge is an infallible mind that is God. Now, I actually plan to make a video that's much more in-depth in this. I already made posts on this, but this is kind of the summarized version I have. So those are the kind of three arguments that I made against P.F. Young. He didn't really respond to them. He kind of just said, well, you're just... he didn't even accuse me of that. He said, well, I think certain arguments like that are language games, but they're not language games. They're not language games because, especially it seemed to me that in this case, whenever I rejected that you can just assume things and have, claim things as self-evident, the moment I reject that turns into a language game. But that's not that's not a justifiable argument. I don't think that is. I don't really believe one can argue anything is self-evident, so to speak. Even things that are self-evident in the sense of knowledge and things like that, even they can be put into the purview of distinct observations depending on what your worldview is. That's ultimately what we're trying to do here. And this is why we can't just assume that whenever we see a word or whenever we see a concept, we have to assume that everyone has to think the same way. Unfortunately, that's not the way the world works. That'll be fun, but that's not how the world works. So we have to kind of understand that a little. Anyways, that's kind of the main thing that I want to talk about with the P.F. Young debate. I guess the re-review came like a week later, but that's fine. Second thing I want to talk about, was there a second thing? No, actually I don't. I think we can start with answering certain questions. And again, if you want to support the stream, make sure to like, subscribe if you haven't already. And you can super chat questions. Will have special attention. They will be 100% answered. I might miss live chat questions. It's not because I'm trying to dodge them. It's because I genuinely might miss them, right? I might not see them being posted because YouTube live chat is kind of strange. I will have to say that it is kind of strange. All right, let me just fill my stream. And the hiatus, I will say, gave me a lot of ideas as well, which is good. You might see some exciting streams and presentations and videos coming. All right, so now let's get to the Q&A. Let's get to the questions and answer them. How would you deal with the fact that you have no Orthodox church nearby where you can understand the language of the liturgy? So are you saying that you don't have a church nearby, or is there no church that does the liturgy in your language? I think the complaints about the liturgy not being done in your language, in a sense, I understand, because I think the best way to do is it in the vernacular. But I will raise a question: do you listen to music for the lyrics? Kind of a question, right? Many people listen to music in different language. I personally like to listen to Japanese music, for example, right? I don't listen to Japanese music because I think the lyrics are deep. I listen to it for other reasons, right? So if we can do this for music, I think it is quite fair to say that one is able to understand the spirit of the liturgy, even if it's not in a language that we understand. And you have plenteous resources available to you online where you can see the liturgy in your original language contrasted to the liturgy that is done in the church that you go to. So I think just go to the church, talk to the priest, and have this conversation with him, and don't snub a church because it does worship in a language that you don't understand. I think all of these kinds of shortcomings in the church, if we can even call them that, can be overcome by the desire of the person who wants to be part of that church. I don't think they might be annoying roadblocks, but I don't think they're roadblocks for one to become Orthodox. So I think you should go. And I think you should look at the translations of the liturgy, and perhaps this might be a good occasion for you to study, right? Or kind of read, because that's what I personally have done. When I was newly Orthodox, I didn't complain because half the liturgy was in Greek. I'm not saying you're complaining, by the way. I'm not saying anyone is complaining, but it's a valid criticism. But we must still, part of being a Christian is, even if things are unfair, we being meek, that is having self-control, understand the things as they are and work to fix them, right? That's part of the essence of being a Christian, the part of essence of being a man, particularly, in my opinion. Obviously not accusing you of anything, because I don't know your situation, and maybe I even misunderstood your question, but that the way I understand it, that's what my answer will be. Rob asks, can you explain how or if the conceptual distinction of two natures in thought can also mean two natures in... Yeah, I have a video on this. I get this question a lot of times. I have video explicitly on this. I mean, I'm so dark here. I just noticed how dark I seem. Just give me a second, actually. Okay. All right. Yeah, it's a weird light, but at least I don't know if this is better. This is much worse. I really need to have a better camera. Let me just it's amazing how light can... Oh, you saw part of my phone. Uh-oh. I'm in great pickle now. I'm in a bit of a pickle since you saw that. Oh, perfect. Seems like it's fixed. All right, this is the fix that we were looking for. So the conceptual distinction, I have the reason why I have obviously, well, not maybe not obvious. I have no problems with Rob asking this question, right? Because this is actually a very difficult aspect. It's something that challenged me when I was reading through the sources, and it's fine that it is the case. But what makes me kind of unhappy is that I get this question many times, but the video that answers this question has so low in views. It's only 1.6k views. you'd guess that if a lot of people have this question, you'd guess that the video that answers this question, it's not even a long video compared to other videos I've done, will have had like 5,000 views or something like this, right? So I'll answer the question, but I'll also post a link here. And the video is really useful because it goes through various different church fathers and how they answer this question. Okay, so Dr. Dave Bradshaw has an article specifically on this topic. But I'll answer the question shortly. So, conceptual distinction is a Saint Gregory of Nyssa calls the mind the highest aspect of man, and since it's the highest aspect of man, knowledge perceived by the mind is also the highest aspect of knowledge. And what Saint Gregory of Nyssa is talking about is knowledge about invisible things, right? So things like concepts, things like the angels, and ultimately God Himself. So when we have knowledge of these things, this knowledge cannot be empirical, right? It cannot be a posteriori. I can't even say it. Empirical knowledge. Okay. Sorry, I have a bad tongue. I can't say a posteriori. All right. But they have to be a priori. That is, they have to, or in other words, at least the way I understand it, they have to be knowledge accessed or seen by the mind. And Leontius of Jerusalem, in Against the Monophysites, when he gets asked this very question, he basically says, well, think of it this way. When we distinguish between the body and the soul, the body is something we can see, right? We can perceive the body and then we can say, yeah, this is a body because of these physical characteristics that we can observe. But what about the soul? Can you see the soul? No. How do you see the soul? Conceptually. Okay. So some concepts are imaginary, made up concepts, right? Like a unicorn. A unicorn does not have existence. So it's an imaginary, made up concept. But the soul, it has a conceptual existence. It really does exist. So the knowledge of it is conceptual, but its existence is not only just conceptual, but it's also real. That's the point. St. Cyril of Alexandria, for example, distinguishes the Father and the Son conceptually in his commentary on John. He uses the term kat epinoia, according to conception. So when the Council of Chalcedon says that the two natures of Christ are acknowledged, that Christ is acknowledged to be in two natures, that is, the distinction of the two natures are made conceptually, as St. Gregory the Theologian and St. Cyril of Alexandria are saying, it does not mean a virtual distinction where it's only in the mind and it doesn't exist in reality. Okay? That's not what is being said. What is being said is that we have knowledge of one thing that is invisible, the divine nature, divinity, and the visible aspect of Christ, which is his humanity. And they're conceptually distinguished for that reason. That's the point. Another reason why conceptual distinction is used is that it points out that the division of the two natures, the so-called division, is merely conceptual, not based in reality. So it's another way of saying distinction without division, right? And whatever logic is used to understand the Trinity, right, there being distinction without division, the same logic is also applied to Christology, that in Christ the two natures are distinguished without dividing the one and the same person, Jesus Christ himself, right? So that's what conceptual distinction means. Again, people who talk about this as if conceptual distinction is the same as Thomas Aquinas' virtual distinction, they have no clue what they're talking about. They get filtered. Totally and absolutely filtered. This is a aspect of Orthodox theology that not a lot of people know. So when St. Gregory of Nyssa says that we conceptually have knowledge of the divine names, or when the Hesychast councils, like like people like Saint Philotius Kokkinos says that the distinction between essence and energy in God is conceptual, that doesn't mean that the distinction between essence and energy is only in the mind and not in reality. That's an unjustified assertion. That doesn't exist in reality. And the video will explain exactly why it's an unjustified assertion, because what I'm saying is not just what I'm saying. It's not just what you're hearing from me. It's what the fathers say. Go read the fathers. 25-minute video. Very easily observable. You can really easily observe what they say. They even define what epinoia means. Okay, they define what epinoia means very clearly. Saint John of Damascus, for example, Yes, it's in this section. Yeah. Dr. Dave Bradshaw says the example of soul and body also figures importantly in the Dialectica of John Damascene, where it is enlisted to clarify the difference between a veridical and a merely imaginative use of epinoia. John identifies the latter with bare epinoia. Epinoia, in the fuller sense, is a certain thinking out and consideration by which the general concept and unanalyzed knowledge of things are unfolded and made fully clear. Man, for example, appears to be simple, as in one thing, but by epinoia he is discovered to be twofold, made up of a body and soul. Just because we can conceive man as body and soul doesn't mean man is two things. Man is one thing, one reality, one existence. So there's a very deep aspect of this as well that is very crucial. Anyways, I'll move on to the next question. What's your view on Eastern Protestantism? If they want to be Eastern, if they want to be like the Orthodox Church, then they should just be the Orthodox Church. That is, they should just come to Orthodox Christianity. Anything that is Protestant is not, by definition, is not Orthodox. It is not true belief, and it's something that originates in the 16th century. I can elaborate on that, but I'll end it there. What's the best written work you would recommend to someone with a Jewish background? Well, I'm not Jewish, so I won't know. Saint Justin Martyr's Dialogue with Trypho, I suppose. A solid reason for the shift away from God's statutes to Christ. Christ's statutes are God's statutes, so I don't understand the point. Is not the church stance Marcionism? No, because we don't deny the Old Testament. The Old Testament has been fulfilled in Christ, and so the laws of the Old Testament have come to, like, think of circumcision. Baptism doesn't, the idea of circumcision in the Old Testament is to set the people of God apart from the other unbelieving nations. Baptism does that, but baptism is also more than that. That baptism is also a true full adoption of people into being a child of God. So the New Testament uses the old law, but the old law is pointing to the New Testament as the completion of its purpose. That's not Marcionism. Marcionism is denying the Old Testament. Please convert to the Coptic. Watch the Oriental Orthodox playlist. I've already. The Coptic Church is not the true faith. I have a massive playlist that I did as a result of actually studying your fathers, Severus of Antioch. I've read every single work of his available that is available on English. I've read various different secondary scholarly works on this issue, and I've also read the responses both that he made against us and us making against him. So I think maybe if you also look up a little bit about what your church believes, I think you're going to realize that it's nonsensical. It doesn't make any logical sense. Just one example is Christ himself created, uncreated? He can't be just created. That's Arianism. He can't just be uncreated. That denies the incarnation. He has to be both. So what is created about him? What is uncreated about him? What is created about him is his humanity. What is uncreated about him is his divinity. Congratulations, you just admitted the two natures. It's as simple as that. One thing cannot be simultaneously created and uncreated, as in one nature. That's Saint Gregory the Theologian. He says even the pagans know that. even the people who believe in weird hybrid pagan myths don't believe that. Hopefully this is worded right, but could you explain in depth and eternal origin with the final sum with the monarchy? I don't understand the question because the sentence is hard for me to understand. I mean, I'm not playing dumb. Hopefully this is worded right, but could you explain in depth and eternal origin with the final? Like this is grammatically invalid, And I usually fill in the blanks, but I literally can't. Like, are you asking, what does it mean that the Father is the monarch of the Trinity? I mean, that's too general of a question. I have various streams that I explain that. The most I can do for you is repeat what Saint Dionysius the Areopagite says on the Divine Names. On the Divine Names 2:5, Saint Dionysius says, "The Father alone is the source of the superessential Godhead, and the Father is not a Son, nor is the Son a Father. For the divine persons all preserve, each without alloy, his own particular attributes of praise." The particular attributes of praise are personal properties or hypostatic properties. Those will be the Father being the uncaused cause, the Son being begotten of the Father, and the Holy Spirit proceeding from the Father. That's what it's referring. Those are the personal attributes. Can you explain the difference between RCU of original sin and EOV of ancestral sin? Well, I have a video on that. Do Orthodox believe in original sin? But the short version, I suppose, is that I mean, there's a longer version as well, because I've noticed that in Orthodoxy, original sin tends to be a lot more cosmic, right? I've only heard from Orthodox Christians the explanation of original sin as affecting the entirety of the universe, entirety of the cosmos. Like in the West, for example, even Thomas Aquinas himself says this, they believe in predator-prey relations prior to the fall, right? They think that's a natural aspect of the world, even before sin. But predator-prey relationships presuppose death, and death did not exist before the fall. Both spiritual death and physical death, right? Some people say, well, physical death, I think that's a cope. I think that's totally a cope. Death because the world was incorrupt. The world was naturally participating in the attributes of God. Man primarily, of course, because he's the steward of all creation. So there wasn't any kind of death. Death was introduced by sin, and aspects of death, right, like defecation, eating physical things, and I specify physical because eating conceptual, that is things of knowledge, that is something that was practiced. That's what the trees signified in the Old Testament, in Genesis. So there is that, but the main point is we just don't believe that, and Roman Catholics today, they used to believe it, now they don't. It's a bit complicated, but in the Western view, or the Augustinian view, all are born guilty of Adam's sin. And this introduces the question of, well, what happens to unbaptized infants that die? We believe that God, since he is omnibenevolent, does not punish guilty, innocent people of hellfire, right? Now they have original sin, so they have blindness, right? So we believe in that, they have blindness. But what we don't believe in, we don't believe that unbaptized infants have guilt. I think that's a ridiculous idea. And unfortunately, this ridiculous idea was believed by some people in the history of the church. But St. John Chrysostom, for example, says, when he talks about baptism, he doesn't say that baptism is done primarily to wash oneself of original sin. That is certainly one of the purposes, but he doesn't even mention it. He says that it is to unite one's life to Christ. That's the purpose of baptism. So in the West, in the Augustinian view, let me correct myself, you will see a debate between, well, what happens to unbaptized infants? If unbaptized infants are guilty of sin in some capacity, then they must be punished. If they have original sin, but they don't have guilt, then saying that they are punished in hell is contradictory, right? So either you have to say babies are guilty, or you have to say babies are innocent, they just have blindness and they cannot fully participate because they're not baptized. St. Gregory of Nyssa has a treatise exactly on this, and he kind of supposes, well, it will be kind of ridiculous if babies didn't do anything and they had the same glory as martyrs and such. On the other hand, it will be ridiculous if we say that they went to hell. So he kind of offers kind of like a middle path, is that they will be in a state that is better than non-existence. That's kind of where he ends it. And Pano, as he says in the live chat, yeah, a lot of what he says is also correct. Thanks for answering. Yeah, I'm happy my answer helped you. So let's see. All right. All right. All right. So it doesn't seem like there's any more question. I think I streamed at a, well, I didn't even schedule my stream, but I'd also not want to leave it off when it's minute 40. So what's happening? Okay. Shall covenants not be built? Thanks for, but shall not the covenants build upon one another? Well, that's exactly what happens. Without doing away, without those steps. Well, okay. Let me just give you the baptism example again. What will be the point of circumcision when you have baptism? Everything that circumcision does, baptism does and more. That's the point of fulfillment. So it's not the doing away of the law, it's the law reaching its completion, reaching its purpose, and being renewed. That's not doing away. Doing away will basically say, well, we don't circumcise anymore, and we don't have any fulfillment of circumcision, so we completely remove the idea of, God separating his own people from others. That will be an abrogation. That will be a removal. That's not what's happening. What has happened is completion. For what concerns the argument you made about the natures of Christ, couldn't that be made about his person too? I mean, St. Cyril of Alexandria does make that kind of a... He says, in speech, it is as if we speak of two persons. But again, this is why context in what you're reading matters. Words have meaning depending on the holistic context that they're written into. So can it if someone wanted to do that, could they do so? Yes. But do the fathers do that when they write these things and make these statements? No, they don't speak of two conceptual persons, because as Leontius of Jerusalem points out, it's unnecessary, right? He kind of says, well, if conceptual distinction just meant, imaginary distinction, then he basically argues then we can make up multiple natures according to him. Then we can say, well, Christ has 5 natures, he's 6 natures, he's 7 natures. But then you will say, well, it's just only conceptual. Well, what's the meaning behind that? There is no meaning in saying that. You will notice that in the Church Fathers, they usually don't speak about conceptual stuff that doesn't exist in reality. Again, a unicorn is something that is conceptual, but it doesn't have an actual existence. You'll notice that the fathers don't talk about unicorns, right? I mean, maybe one does in a typological manner. Like maybe someone might find that and like, I refuted you, David. No, maybe someone does it in a typological manner. Okay, that doesn't mean that unicorns exist, right? It's that idea. So it will be completely unnecessary to be able to be doing that. They could, but why would they? Is kind of the point that I will. If someone wanted to make that point in theology, then the most that they can say is, as St. Cyril of Alexandria says, or as St. Leo of Rome say, is treating the natures as grammatical subjects. Now, if you read Hans van Loon's Cyril of Alexandria's Diophysite Christology, he explains what this means. So all actual subjects, like you and I, are being ontological subjects, are also grammatical subjects. We're grammatical persons too. When you write about me, when you speak about me, that's attributing some grammatical aspect of language to referring to something about me. But what if I just said, I try to wax poetic and said, my soul hungers for knowledge. Let's say I said that. My soul in the sentence is being treated as a grammatical subject, right? So that's what St. Cyril of Alexandria says when he says, according to our speech, sometimes it seems like we're talking about two persons, but then he says, we are not talking about two persons. It's just that we're grammatically speaking this. So he's differentiating between grammatical subjecthood and ontological subjecthood. All ontological subjects are grammatical subjects, but not all grammatical subjects are ontological subjects. That's how I will answer. Which council did EO definitely affirm the canon? Well, the biblical canon. The first thing I will say about that, if you're talking about the Old Testament canon, the thing about the Old Testament canon is that because the Septuagint and the books of the Septuagint have been accepted by most parts of the church, the Old Testament canon is, I will say, more or less rigid throughout history. The New Testament canon historically has consistently, some people have said, well, the Shepherd of Hermas is inspired and should be considered scripture. Some people argued other parts of other New Testament, other books should be in the New Testament, or certain books that are in the New Testament shouldn't be, etc. But I will say, generally speaking, from what I've seen, the biblical canon, as it is in the Orthodox Study Bible, historically has been the biblical canon of the Orthodox Church historically. But I'm not an expert on that per se. But I don't think this question even really matters, because we're not a bookish religion. What I mean by that is, for a lot of religions, usually the holy book comes first, right? You have the holy book first, coming down from the skies to us or something, or some inspired person writing, or multiple inspired persons writing. And then we read the book, and then we come to a conclusion about what the book teaches. But that's a completely backwards way of knowing the doctrines of a religion, knowing the religion itself, right? Because a book is subject to personal interpretation. You need a normative body, you need a pillar and ground of truth, and as St. Paul says, that pillar and ground of truth is the church. And so what we have as the normative teaching institution of doctrines and such is the church, specifically the Orthodox Church. So the reason why I don't know this question, aside from being lazy and stuff, is also because I think it's not really necessary to know what books are exactly the canon to know what the teachings of the church are. Yeah, I mean, look, man, I've answered your question. I can't answer it a third time. I've already explained how baptism is a fulfillment, how fulfillment is different from abrogation. So either you don't understand, or I'm bad at explaining. One of them has to be true. I don't know which, but if my explanation is bad, then you have to forgive me. What is your view of salvation outside the church, not just in a general sense, but considering also exceptions? What do you mean by that? Well, I guess I can answer that question. The church is the ark of salvation, and as such, outside of the church, there is no salvation. On the other hand, I'm gonna make the distinction this way. I think this distinction is more helpful. When you're in the church, the process of your salvation is according to the promise of God. When you're outside the church, it is according to the will of God. What I mean by that is that God has promised salvation to those in the church. Now, whether those people in the church reject that salvation, etc., that's a different subject. And so because it is according to his promise, it is something that we can talk about with certainty. But outside, we have to decree that to God's will and his mercy. And as such, since we cannot know what the will of God is in matters pertaining to this, we can only know what God's will is within the church. Our answer has to be categorically a we don't know. All we know is that the tools of salvation is in the church. Outside of church, whatever happens is within God's jurisdiction, and it's something that is not shared with us, the knowledge of that. Saint Cilion the Atenite basically gives this answer, right? You should be focused on your salvation before you should be focused on whether other people are saved or not. But you should also be try to bring them to the truth, right? That's a mission that we all have. Whether that mission is actualized in a certain capacity and a different capacity in different modes and such, that differs, right? So someone can be a missionary by their good works, by showcasing their good works, and people witnessing those good works and being inspired by those good works and being pulled to Christ, since those good works are really the works of Christ, right? Because there's synergy. Or it's by argumentation, debates, and logic, whatever mode, right? There's various different modes in this. So with Immaculate Conception and Original Sin, the reason why Immaculate Conception kind of became necessary is that having original sin was equivocated with being a sinner or committing sin, in a sense, especially in the Western kind of theology of original sin, whereas we never really had that idea. We believe that you can have original sin, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you are a sinner. You have committed personal sins. So there's a difference between committing personal sins and being sinful according to nature. Those are two very different things. Have I changed I never changed my mind, ever. Never. I'm always right. I haven't changed my mind about that, what I think of him. All right. The original sins. Yeah, I was talking with a Muslim who converted from Christianity recently, and it was like it wasn't even like I didn't try to make this. He was the one who tried to make this a religious discussion. Not saying that's a bad thing, but he made the point, for example, that in the West there used to be a time where they will argue, in the situation where one has to choose between the mother dying and the child and the unborn child dying. The reason why they will say we have to, the mother has to die, that they will argue, is because if the child dies unbaptized, then they go to hell, right? So he kind of made that point, and I basically pointed out, well, according to our theology, we don't believe that. We don't believe that babies are punished in eternal hellfire. Generally speaking, we don't believe that innocent people are punished. But we do believe that sin causes you to be blind. It causes you not to be able to see things as they are. It causes you not to be able to experience the fullness of God's grace. And this is what's tragic about sin. This is what is tragic about original sin. So as St. Gregory of Nyssa says, we can't really, they're not sinners, but they're not also, people who are as holy and blessed as the martyrs are. Right? And so he kind of takes the middle position, is that, well, they will simply be in a state. All we know is they will be in a state, according to God's mercy, that is much better than non-existence, right? That is not being created at all. It's better than not being created at all. So I personally think that answer is more than satisfactory to me. So the moment you admit that, you're basically avoiding the problematic interpretation of both views, both extremes. Should I go to a Russian church or Greek church before becoming a catechumen in the OCA? You should, whatever church is best for your soul, and that is, I'm not talking about jurisdiction. Whatever church you go to that is around you is best for you, by various different factors, such as best for your soul, best for your travel, right? Your convenience. Like if one is much closer to you, maybe you should prefer going to there. Which parish is more active in an Orthodox life, an Orthodox spiritual life, and all of these things. That's what you need to concern yourself with. Don't concern yourself with what jurisdiction a church is. I don't think that's something that really matters. I think people have overblown I made a video on like navigating jurisdictions things, and people have really overblown the jurisdiction ranking, which the whole point was to illustrate a point and to also give my own subjective opinion, which I said multiple times in the video is my subjective opinion. I am not saying at all that like the last place church is a church you should never go to. Absolutely not. I don't believe that. I believe that whatever community, whatever church is best for you within your immediate vicinity is the church that you should go to. Whatever church is best for your soul, essentially. Of course, this is assuming that church is a canonical church. So if you end up going to they might have a nice community, but if you end up going to a whatever uncanonical church, then that's not an Orthodox church. So it being Orthodox, that is canonically Orthodox, is the most important part. The most important thing that you need. Orthodoxy is true because Greeks and Turks can commune. Yeah. A Turk, an Albanian, and an Azerbaijani walk into a Serbian church, and nothing bad happens. They just have a good time. Which is an anti-joke, basically. So, this is the first time you see anything from you. This is No. You don't even have to watch the video, to be honest. It's just other people have done that, but hopefully my answer has helped you, Jacob. My Envar. All right. Well, an hour is about to pass. So if anyone has any, and by the way, again, feel free to like, subscribe if you haven't. Be sure to check my other videos as well, because I certainly think they will be very helpful. And if you want to support my channel via Super Chats, feel free to do so. It seems like there's not a lot more questions. So I might as well just end. I suppose I will just end the stream here. Again, I've just planned this to be a short one. I just wanted to stream today because it's been such a long time. Are you enjoying Jorge Jesus at Fenerbahce? Nice question, my friend. I am. Yes, I'm a Jesus fan, right? I'm a big fan of Jesus Christ, and I'm a big fan of Jorge Jesus. So, are you going to respond to some of the clips? Yeah, I will be doing a review of that debate. Absolutely. I think. Well, I say that I haven't even watched it, not because I didn't want to, because as I said, I was away. I didn't have my computer. I didn't have anything with me. I didn't have the time to watch any debate or any video. I just now got back. I'll watch the debate at some point. I'll watch some other stuff at some point and do reviews of them as well. But I've listened to, I've heard some of the arguments from people I trust, from Lewis himself, right? I've heard kind of his impressions of it, and all I gotta say is, yeah, his positions is not smart. It's not a good position. There's a lot of extreme blunders that I heard. Like, for example, he cites multiple forgeries as evidence during the debate. Typical behavior from him. I mean, this is the guy who posted a section of Saint Maximus the Confessor, where he says these attributes are in every sense identical, and he's making it he's acting as if that's about identity thesis. But then you read the fuller quote. This is a guy who posts a half quote to make a point, but the full quote absolutely refutes him because he only says, well, the two attributes. I think it was faith and hope. I want to be sure exactly what St. Maximus says, but no, that's not the quote I was looking for. But it's on Twitter. I can't find it. It's on Twitter, but basically he only equivocates two attributes that are already commonly close to, each other, and he says one is the manifestation of the other, basically. So we're talking about, I mean, he has a history of not using correct documents, using forged documents to try to make his point. I mean, so it's utterly ridiculous. But that's the smallest error he makes. I can guarantee you that. So, but what makes it annoying is that these things can't be called out during the debate unless you know beforehand that they're going to be used, or unless you are so in the know that you can just instantly call out. Like, he used it against Eunomius 4 from St. Basil, apparently. The academics think against Eunomius 4 is not from St. Basil. Secondly, that means you can use against Eunomius 5. I don't think he wants to say that against Eunomius 5 is legitimate because, boy, I gotta tell you, that's one of the most anti-filioquist works that exist in church history, in early church history. He should be lucky that it's considered not authentic, because I mean, if Saint Gregory Palamas himself wrote it, it wouldn't have been that obvious. I can tell you that much. So it's just classic Tradcraft behavior. I mean, their whole church is propped up from forgeries and false documents and the false readings. I mean, contrary Eras Graecorum of Thomas Aquinas, 70% of the quotes are forgeries. Okay, 70% of them, 70% or somewhere around. Yeah, you should probably not use that. You should probably not use that as your source. But again, he'd be lucky. These people will be lucky if that was the worst mistake in this regard. That's not the worst mistake at all. But I'm going to cover that this week, sometime this week, certainly. I think I'm more interested in understanding how to determine if a church is canonical. There's a website for that. Assuming you're from the United States. Here you go. The Assembly of Bishops, Directories, Parishes. Check this link out. These are you can just type in your address. Don't worry, they're not going to save your. I'm not going to save your address. This is not my website. And you can see the canonical parishes around you. So, anyways, I think that should be enough. I wanted to cover more, but again, I'm very sleepy. I'm very tired. Just got out for a long flight, 4-hour flight. And I'll see all of you later. I can promise. I'll upload the debate on my channel if you want to see the debate between PF Young and I. And in the coming days, keep your eyes open. You're going to see a lot of good content. Thank you for watching the stream, and I will see all of you in the next video or stream. And before I leave, before I forget, I would like to give a shout out to my financiers, my very generous, very nice, and very beautiful financiers. Thank you to Robert, Sean, Larry, Andy, Peyton, Giga Chad, Quinn, Michael, Sean, Brian, Marco, Diet, Sodlight, Allison, Eddie, Node, Maximus, Vlad, Kerry, Mike, Nectarius, Flood Basement, Dave, Seraphim, and Norbert. Thank you all for your support. I'll see all of you